All right, everyone. Today we start off with polling analysis, of course. Rather important, of course. There's only about 2 weeks left until the election. If you're not registered to vote and you're still eligible to do so in your state, make sure to do so. Then go knock on a door, harvest a ballot. On election day, drag along a reluctant friend. Even if you vote earlier by mail or something, you can still go on election day and get that one friend that's like, nah, I don't really know. Maybe. It's kind of drizzly today. Just get off your ass and do it, you say, and get them to the polls. Link in the description to the rolling RCP average. This is for the presidential polling mainly. Trump is now ahead in every swing state. In Wisconsin and a couple of others, it's by less than a point. But in a couple of the states, it appears that he's pulling away, basically, from Harris. And in national polling, I'm looking at just the last week's polls. I'm ignoring the older ones, although they are still part of the aggregate. In 4 out of those 8 polls, Trump is ahead. It's basically a 50-50 sum game. I would point out that at the same time, in the last election, Biden was like 9 points ahead or thereabouts. Hillary Clinton was, I think, 5 points ahead or thereabouts. So it is a major shift from 2016, which Trump won, and an even more major shift from 2020, where if you look at the state-to-state polling, and RCP also aggregates that, you can look off to the side, Trump was never particularly ahead in the swing states, actually, in those elections either. Hillary Clinton had a considerable lead, for example. I mean, Trump led by only 0.5 in Ohio, for example. Look at the number now. It's not 0.5. Florida is now fairly solidly red. We have a new poll from Florida, Trump +7. Florida had been a 50-50 state for cycle after cycle after cycle. Ohio, only 5 or 6 election cycles ago, was effectively a swing state. What we've seen is a move towards a much more red heartland, a much more red southeast, other than Georgia, of course. And then the Pacific Northwest and parts of the Southwest, they've gone much more blue. We've seen the splitting of the country into effectively those two blocks. The red is becoming more red, the blue is becoming more blue. Now, this may very well change with any given election. Right now, we're looking at a map that is effectively the same interplay that we've had over the last 2. Under such circumstances, I believe that that's favorable to Donald Trump, because the sort of states that need to be targeted are the sort of states in which there are sort of outcast former Dems, which did defect to Trump in large numbers in places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and up in the Rust Belt, etc., towards Donald Trump in 2016. Now, they snapped back towards Biden in the next election, but it was a really underwhelming movement, to the point where he won the election by less than 100,000 votes across a handful of states. It was a very small margin. If these numbers are remotely correct, then even if we don't have to compensate for any shift in the polls last minute, there's not going to be an October surprise, it seems, for example. I can't imagine. I mean, I think that his French fry stunt probably wins the hearts and minds of a handful of voters, but it's not a huge sea change. It'll be hilarious. It's meme-worthy. It's free advertising. It's what Donald does best. Ronald McTrump, basically. I don't think that it plays a huge role, though. It's funny. It's fodder for the base. But beyond that, how many independent voters are going to be swayed by saying, oh my God, Trump served French fries? Not that many. Maybe a few. It could be helpful. It'd be funny if the fact that Trump served somebody a bag of French fries clinches the election in Pennsylvania or something like that. Stranger things have happened. Haven't we just been through 2 of the weirdest elections in U.S. history? Methinks so. But Trump is now rising. If you look, Nate Silver is now giving him the edge. And Nate Silver is a liberal, so he's not doing that lightly. Basically, everyone other than Alan Lichtman right now is predicting a Trump victory. The markets are, the betting markets are, Nate Silver, the RCP aggregate, and so forth. Basically, everyone's like, yeah, Trump has the edge now. It's dawning on them. They're finally realizing that Trump is no longer the underdog. Now, this is faceted. This is presented against a background fiscally, which is very interesting. Did you see the September fundraising haul for Harris versus Trump? Trump is being 3-1 by the Harris campaign. Despite the fact that Harris is raising a lot more money, mainly from big donors. I like how they say, well, most of the money is coming from grassroots sources. Well, no, not numismatically. You're talking there are more small donors than there are large donors, but the large donors make up the bulk of that money. She's out raising him. She's out advertising him. And she's holding to a more rigorous schedule at this time for fundraisers, etc. Although she hasn't had a major presser yet, and probably won't, because the more people see of her, the more they dislike her. And yet she's behind by a couple of points. I think that that's rather telling. That's the other thing. I said months ago, when Kamala first got into the race and was presumptively going to be nominated, there was no real contest. I said the Kasich effect is going to kick in. She's going to get a boost. She's going to rise ahead of Trump. And then she's going to have to go out there and actually make her case to the American people. She can't hide forever. She's going to have to go to rallies where she'll make mistakes. She's going to have to do interviews where she consistently makes mistakes. She's going to have to hold at least one presser. She did, and she made mistakes. The more people see of her, unless she goes on an echo chamber network, the more they dislike her. The reason why she had that original advantage was because there were people that are gauging generic Democrat, because they didn't know much about Kamala Harris, versus a known quantity, which is Donald Trump. So if they weren't really fond of Trump, they default to supporting Kamala Harris. Now, though, they've actually got a platform that they can judge against Donald Trump. And that platform, very helpfully, in Kamala Harris's own words, is a doppelganger of Biden's policies. She has refused to criticize Joe Biden. When repeatedly asked about it, she says, no, I can't think of any policy that I disagreed with him on. So basically, voters that are actually privy to that information are saying, okay, so basically I can vote for Donald Trump or I can vote for another term of Biden. So, I mean, if you looked at the polling metrics when Trump was up against Biden, he was handily crushing him. And that's before, by the way, the disastrous debate that they had. Kamala, at least to her credit, if one credit is due, didn't botch the debate as badly as Biden did, but that's pretty low-hanging fruit. The Kasich effect is very, very real. When you have a known quantity versus an unknown quantity, people who generally don't like the known quantity are going to default to the other side. But now you've got two known quantities. People are abandoning Kamala Harris. That original surge was doomed anyway. And I predicted that would happen. People were like, oh my God, Kamala's going to run away with it. She's going to sweep all 50 states. It's stupid stuff like that. I said, no, it's because a lot of people simply don't know anything about her. They've been fixated on Biden. They're waiting to hear what Kamala has to say. She's saying the same fucking things. If anything, she's a bit further left from Joe Biden, leans more towards the Geek Squad side of the party, and will id poll appease them. It'll be the same, crumbs from the table mentality that every other neoliberal tends to have, but she's going to lean into it more. She hasn't really, on a couple of issues, she's tried to present herself as a moderate. Normally, this is copying Trump's homework, by the way. Expanded child tax credit and all these other things. She borrowed them from the Trump campaign. Her more popular policies are basically just Trump's policies watered down and made more id poll. That's basically all you get with Kamala Harris. It is not surprising to me, therefore, that she is lagging in the polls, that she's slowly on her way down, that Trump is slowly on his way up. At this 11th hour, with only about 2 weeks to go, that basically seals the deal in my mind. Sans shenanigans, which we know will happen. The problem is that in some of those states you've got defortification, in others partial defortification, and the gap between 2016, well, we'll use the lower metric, where Trump did win, in a squeaker, at least in the electoral sense, by 100,000 votes here and 50,000 votes there. The gap between the polling then and the polling now is enormous. We're talking about millions and millions of voters. And if you look at the early voting, Republicans should not have such an edge in early voting as they do in some of these states. It's pretty interesting indeed. That's about all. Peace out.